Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone, this is a friendly reminder that we are here for entertainment purposes only. We may not even be that entertaining at times, but this is not medical advice. Talk to your doctor, check with your healthcare professionals before making any lifestyle changes or medicine changes. What we're talking about is our clinical experience and what we've seen. And so if you really want our advice, you can consult us. You can actually consult me as a doctor, or you can consult my guest and get all your questions answered. But we can't give free medical advice because we can't pay our bills with that, but we can help to educate you a bit and allow you to think a little bit. And always reach out to your medical professional before making any lifestyle changes. Thank you. Hello, and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. Today, I have a real live doctor here who's a ER doc, well-trained. Unfortunately, some of the places he went are a little suspect. Notre Dame undergrad, and then Ohio State University. You've done some professor stuff over there, and also Wright State. So you've been around doing your thing, ER trained, board certified, teaching a lot, and then you end up doing pain management stuff and metabolic health and all that kind of good stuff. Dr. Paul Kolodzik, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
It's great to have you, man. I mean, you've been doing a lot of good stuff. So tell people your story that don't know you. We'll start out in the younger years and formative years and how you were possessed to go into medicine, and then how your education has changed over the years.
So I'm an Ohio guy, Midwest guy, so have always lived out here. And I was going to mention to you, the metabolic focus hasn't really hit the Midwest yet as much as I would like it to. I think a little bit more popular on the East and the West Coast, and we have a lot of people that can use our help here in the Midwest. So I'm actually one of probably just a handful of practitioners in Ohio, and it's growing, but it's been slow. But I grew up in Columbus, so a Buckeye fan, and then switched over to the Irish when I went to when I went to college. One thing, I know you talk about faith some on here, Brian, and one thing that I did want to mention is actually, so I'm Catholic. I was raised Catholic. And actually, I kind of maxed out on Catholic education, from first grade, actually all the way through college. And then I went and got an MBA at the University of Dallas, which is also a Catholic institution. I didn't realize the value of that, when I was growing up, to be, educated in a faith-based environment. And I think, reflecting on that, there has been a lot of advantages to that. Well, one I got to mention is just being around some very smart people. When you're around Jesuits for a period of time, you learn how to think critically. So that's been an important part of my life.
Well, that's good to hear. And part of the reason I started this podcast was I was taking heat on Low Carb MD podcast where we first met, because I would talk about faith and hope and things like that when things were not looking too great. And so, I was surprised at the backlash on that, the attacks that came, and said, how can you be a doctor and have faith? They're almost as if they're mutually exclusive. And like you're saying, a lot of these people are deep thinkers and they get life better than most people do.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I believe faith and medicine greatly complement each other. I mean, you realize, as I think we've talked before, what a privilege it is to be involved in very important moments of people's lives. When you're delivering good news, when you're delivering bad news, when they're stressed, and faith has got to be an important part of that. For my personal journey, I was, raised in a traditional Catholic household, so there, a lot of tradition in the Catholic faith. And then, I got busy with medical school and life in general, raising kids, and I wasn't as active for a while. And now as I get older, I've had a little bit more of a chance to reflect and get more deeply back involved in my faith, and it's been very gratifying. I think I feel like it's put me on a good path for the rest of my life.
Yeah, and that may be something, that's one thing I was noticing. I was so busy all the time. I didn't have time to think about faith or all those things. I would just be like trying to survive the day and just trying to go through in medicine, and you don't even have time to think. And you go, gosh, how many times would we have just taken a breath and said, okay, I need your help right here to get me through this next patient encounter or whatever. And in your line of work in the ER, it's even way more intense than what I do.
Yeah, it's been good to have that again complement my work. So anyways, got out of medical school, did my residency in emergency medicine, and then had a 30-year career in the emergency department. I wouldn't change that for anything. Eventually it was time to move on to other interests that we'll talk about. But learning how to think on your feet, just in the emergency department, quite honestly, all you are is really a problem solver. You just got to figure out how to solve one problem at a time, and whether that's related to the medicine or what's going on with the social situation, with the family, what's going on administratively in the hospital at the moment, and how you got to work around issues like call schedules and things like that, or taking certain approaches that are best for your patients that maybe the hospital administration doesn't want you to take. You're just problem solving, and so that was a good background, and I enjoy it. I still work 1 day a week in the Veterans Affairs emergency department out here in Dayton, Ohio. So it continues to be satisfying. I can't give it up, Brian. I just enjoy that too much. So.
Yeah, so that's just in your blood, and for me, I was like, I loved the ER docs. I loved. I mean, I just hit it off with those guys, and intense, but they relaxed too when they could, and they dealt with life well, and they kind of put things in perspective a lot. But when you're in a very intense environment like that, it's a very, a lot of my guys friends got atrial fibrillation. They had some stress related stuff just because of the super intense. It's, you can't just take things slow. You're busy, hectic, going from one patient to the next. It's not like you're just there in a clean office, and no blood and guts around you.
Yeah. Yeah. You sure that AFib was from the intensity of their work, or not from the 10 cups of coffee they had that day?
Yeah, yeah, it's the combination, right? To get through that day, and then the intensity. Yeah.
That's one reason actually I like the VA. I almost consider working at the VA in the emergency department now. It's almost kind of I hope my bosses don't hear me say this, but kind of a semi-retirement, because the pace is slower there, and I actually get time to now pull up a chair and talk with the vets and hear their stories. And that's very satisfying. So, um, in the emergency medicine setting is kind of where I grew over a period of time to have an appreciation for the metabolic health aspect of things. Because you see so many patients that have so many conditions for many years, and they've gotten by. They've gotten by with that high blood sugar or that little bit of COPD, or some kidney problems, or the venous stasis changes before the peripheral vascular disease sets in. But then often in that emergency department setting, because of years of some physical neglect and not addressing issues that they should have, then they're at a crisis point. Now they're in the kidney failure, or having an ischemic limb, or an MI. And so part of that was my motivation to eventually move into a metabolic health setting and see how we could help people there.
Yeah, and how did you make that transition? Because that's a hard thing to do, as far as, going from an ER doc working all the time and then trying to transition into more of a clinical type practice outpatient.
Yeah, it's an interesting approach, because I've never been a primary care doc. I don't have the background that you and Tro and others have. You've been managing hypertension or thyroid disease for years. I don't have that background. But the things that you need to do to keep people metabolically healthy or set them on that journey, quite honestly, aren't rocket science. It's relatively simple. And then I've been able to mesh that with, having a great relationship with the primary care docs of the patients that I work with. And like you, Brian, it's, it's very satisfying when you take care of a few patients and all of a sudden the PCP is sending patients your way to just help them with their metabolic health. Well, they continue to manage their medical problems.
Yeah, that's a pretty awesome, that's new to me also, actually. This is a very new thing where I'm not a lot of people, I'm not even their primary. I'm just consulting for the metabolic disease, diabetes, some of the neurologic stuff maybe they're having and mood stuff maybe. And the primary doesn't have time because they have an 8-minute, 12-minute appointment and they don't have time to deal with, okay, your husband's cheating on you and you're stressed out and you're tense. And so we miss so much and don't realize, oh, maybe they have heartburn because they're having stress at home and they're drinking too much and all these other things that we can fix rather than just throwing drugs at things and try to band-aid it.
Right, right. Hey, can we drop back a little bit? And I wanted to just talk about a little bit. We touched base on this before when we did the Low Carb MD podcast on kind of the way medicine has changed. I got out in practice for the first time in the mid 1980s, finished my residency in the mid 1980s. And back in those days, most of the docs were in their own practices, physician-owned practices, either hanging out their own individual shingle or in small practices. And that has just evolved, tremendously over the years. I assume it's the same in California as it is out here, where most docs now are working. It's primarily for health systems in this area. Is that what you see as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Most people are involved in a big system and they're kind of a cog in the wheel and they go, look, here's how many patients you're seeing. Here's what you're going to do. Here's how you're going to treat this problem. Here's the guideline, follow it. And that's it.
Right. And patients come to me now, and I have to be careful because I really believe, primary care providers are the backbone of American medicine. There's no question that's where the greatest value is. But now they're in structured systems where, better than I, you get 20 minutes for that 6-month appointment or a half hour, and the documentation criteria have to be completed. And so the patients that come to me, they're appreciative of their doc, but the doc does not have time for the types of interventions we're doing in terms of trying to reverse disease, or de-prescribe. Unfortunately, they're in a tough situation where it's like, you have these medical issues. I got 20 minutes with you. We just have to manage those. And if that means adding a little bit more insulin or, bumping your antihypertensive, unfortunately, that's kind of what happens. And there isn't time for a lot less. And that's why I think being able to help patients with the dietary portion and the activity portion and having them understand the importance of, for example, blood glucose control, or that, if you're pre-diabetic, you aren't destined to be diabetic. We can reverse this. That's why I find this so satisfying. But I think what has given practices like mine an opening, is the way the medical system is structured now.
Yeah, and people see it. They know if you care and they know if you know who they are. Like, when people walk in and they're like, well, oh, which one are you? Hold on a second. Let me figure this out. And they're flipping through the charts and everything's flying all over the place. Their backs to you and they're typing in the computer. They're trying to figure stuff out. And they're just their job is to get you in and out as fast as possible. So people sense that. And I think a lot of people don't realize the value of us docs is our first of all, our knowledge base, but also our time to be able to sit back and say, give me a few minutes to like put this picture together, because if you only show me one little part of the picture, I can't really figure it out. And so that's the problem is, and I agree with you that the primary care doctors are under such immense pressure. And I could speak from experience. My whole for years, for maybe 15 years, my whole purpose was to say, how can I be more efficient so I could spend time with patients and still get my notes and still call in the meds and still go home and see my wife at night. And it was that efficiency of chronically trying to fix the efficiency problem, which you can't fix if you're seeing 30 patients a day.
Yeah, yeah. This may be the same way with you, but I find that the most important notes in my chart are, married to so and so, some marital difficulty, or has 3 children, one is away at college and having a difficult time, or a lot of stress at work in her executive position. It's like those are the notes that are probably more valuable than anything medical I could possibly put in their chart, because they do two things. They help me understand the patient, and then they also help me get at the heart of what their issues are. So the medicine's important. And we do all the other things, we talk about what their continuous glucose monitor readings are, and what we can do related to diet to get those numbers better, et cetera. But it's almost the social notes that I put in there that are more important, because they're what allows me to lead to the connection with the patient.
Yeah, and that's the important thing. And that's the other thing that you bring up, is that people don't realize the impact of the primary care is when you see them in the ER, that means disasters happen. Our goal is to keep my guys away from your ER, right? To
Yeah.
say, what can we do to prevent that ER visit? And the other tragic thing, as we talk about how medicine changed, I just saw a patient for the last 2 years, his primary has not seen him one time. He's talked to him on the phone only. He's afraid of COVID. He won't go into the office at all. And so he's like, forget this. And he came to me, he's like, you're my doctor already, because you shook my hand and you looked me in the eye, and you're asking about my family, what my hobbies are, what do I enjoy in life. No one's ever asked me that for the last 10 years of my, being a patient.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about the way COVID has changed things. I think telemedicine is a great tool. I see a lot of patients via telemedicine. But it seems at times that it has distance to patients from their doctor. And I think, you got to be seeing some patients in the office to connect with them. So,
Yeah, and telemedicine's been a great thing for a lot of people who are, remote. Maybe they're, 30 miles away and they don't have to drive in, and they're at their office and they don't have time to come in, but you can, visit them at lunch, and they don't have to, take away from their busy schedule. They're an attorney, or, someone who's very busy. They don't have time to go wait in park and, wait for, my old practice, and not for me, and that was part of my stress, was I always tried to be on time for my patients, because I want to respect their value and their time. But I saw some patients waiting there for 2 hours, 2.5 hours to see their doctor. And, in orthopedics, I see that, where people are waiting 2.5. I've experienced that. And you think, wow, there's just no respect to the patient sometimes.
yeah, yeah, you're right. So then I mentioned, oh, I had this career in emergency medicine, and then I think, I had an addiction medicine background as well. The opiate addiction hit the Midwest pretty hard. Saw a lot of overdoses, saw, unfortunately, some tragic outcomes with, cerebral anoxia, and patients coming in, and are going to really have their lives changed forever. In particular, I had a case with a young mother with 3 kids, and her outcome from a fentanyl overdose was cerebral anoxia, and it was just heartbreaking. So I then did, and I'm actually kind of moving on from this, but I actually had an addiction medicine practice for about 7 years, yeah, using Suboxone, which I think is an appropriate medicine for many patients, as long as it's controlled and as long as there's a goal to not be on it for the rest of your life. But I saw with those patients that accountability was an important component of their progress. So that means, coming in, you got to stop into the office. It can't be all telemedicine. You got to stop into the office, and we need to be checking a urine every once in a while, just to keep you honest. And I see a lot of parallels between that and the metabolic health stuff. I think patients want accountability. They want to know you're looking at their CGM patterns, and they want to know that they're going to need to come into your office periodically, and you're going to talk about their weight. So it doesn't mean it has to be handed completely related to all the numbers. But I think one of the things we do, and one of the things that I think is reflected in metabolic health, the same as addiction medicine, is the need for accountability. And I know there's a lot of discussion of, food addiction, and that issue. But I think even for patients that truly don't have a food addiction, just patients that are trying to get well, gentle but firm, firm accountability of their progress, I think it's an important component.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing. And even a pat on the back, say, "Oh my gosh, look at you doing so good. Look at your sugars. Oh my goodness, look at you, what this means." And to have that encouragement, a lot of people, what I find is that they don't have a good social support at home. And maybe that's what led to the food addiction, the obesity, and that that's their comfort, right? So it's just like it would be with drugs with your addiction patients. So when you start understanding how interconnected these things are, where you're really seeking for something that you're missing, maybe you're depressed and you drink, or maybe you're stressed out and you smoke crack or whatever, and so you start really starting to understand how how we deal with life and life stress. And the other thing is, a lot of these studies people point to, or they say, okay, we're going to get a mouse and we're going to put on so many calories a day and exercise and they lose weight. Look, that's all you got to do. Well, the mouse isn't going through divorce and a boss that's a jerk and all these things that we have to deal with in real life. And what do we turn to when we're stressed out or tense?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I think patients are looking at for support, and I think, if we can provide the kind of communication, the relationship that you and I just spoke about, where they feel they're connecting with you, and quite honestly, they just feel that you care. Then that will motivate them as well.
And
Um,
along those
Go
lines,
ahead.
what's the Sinclair method?
So the Sinclair method, I wanted to talk a little with that background in addiction medicine, because some of it is carried over into my metabolic health practice. So this is related to the use of medications to treat patients that have alcohol problems. So when initially I started doing the addiction medicine thing, it was primarily opiates because the need was so bad out here in the Midwest. Now, that infrastructure has improved greatly over the course of the last 5 or 7 years. Initially, I was one of the only providers out there. But in the last 5 or 7 years, there's more infrastructure to address the opiate issue. And so a lot of my practice has gravitated to, the long-term issue of people that have alcohol problems. The Sinclair method is using naltrexone, which you're probably familiar with, oral naltrexone, to decrease alcohol use. So, naltrexone basically is an opiate blocker, including to some degree the in endorphins and enkephalins that are naturally in our system. So the Sinclair method has to do with taking a naltrexone an hour before you're going to have a drink. So this is more of a harm reduction approach as opposed to an abstinence approach. And I've had a lot of patients that have come to me that are drinking too much, but they don't want to stop drinking altogether. I think there's a significant number of people that want to do that, but they know things are in excess right now. So we use the Sinclair method, which is take an naltrexone 1 hour before you drink alcohol. And it helps mute their alcohol response and they lose some of that reinforcement. So with alcohol patients, we use naltrexone and then we use journaling, which is basically keeping an alcohol log, which helps everybody that is drinking too much. And then we put other parameters also around their drinking. If the first thing they do is walk in the door and grab a drink, and they're going to be drinking between 5 p.m. and 10 p.m. after work, then maybe the answer is go take a walk, okay, but when you get home. And let's push that first drink back till at least 6:30 p.m. And so you start putting collars and parameters around that. Some of that includes alcohol-free days. How many days of drink a week do you usually drink? Well, doc, I usually drink, maybe 6 days a week or so. Well, tell you what, let's try and make that 4 next month. And so it's just kind of a gradual process of bringing the parameter we use is drinks per week. That's really kind of the ultimate variable, is just bringing those numbers down over time.
Yeah, and that may be how many cookies do you have a week, right? And saying, okay, can we get down
There
from
you
every
go.
day? Can we do it every other day, every third day? And so that's a great approach too. And I'm curious with the naltrexone, is there a benefit with regard to binge eating or those any other addiction type behaviors, or is it more specific to alcohol and opiates?
I haven't seen anything out there related. I haven't noticed it with my patients. But you kind of teed up the next discussion, which is the use of semaglutide in that situation. Actually, you and I have not talked about this. What is your take on semaglutide? For weight loss or metabolic health, because now there's some studies that are coming out that's saying that these medications might help long-term metabolic health irrespective of weight. And I know we're always looking for the next best drug, the next panacea, but I'm interested if you use that some in your practice, or or what your thinking is on that we're talking about Wegovy, Ozempic, semaglutide, all the same medicine.
Yeah, I've actually had really good success. I really have tried to avoid medications when possible, but now I'm realizing there's some people the medication is really going to help them if they really are struggling with food addiction and binge eating. It seems that when people aren't as hungry, it does help. Now, some people will, as I've learned, binge eat even if they're not hungry, even if they're completely stuffed. If they're upset with someone or something happens, and everything kind of goes out the window for some people, but it seems to really help people get on track. And my concern was, okay, we use this for 2 or 3 months, and you start getting on track, and what's the relapse rate? And I don't think we have a lot of data on that yet, but it seems like when people don't change their lifestyle and they just go, and I hear it all the time now, their doctor goes, here, take this drug, you'll lose weight and everything's fine. They don't change anything. We have to really focus on the metabolic health part of it. So I think using them in conjunction, I think would be extremely powerful.
Yeah, and that's what I'm doing. It's like, we bring people in, we usually get them started a few weeks, or excuse me, a few months of, focused low carb approach, and using the continuous glucose monitors. And then if they get stalled, then we look at that option. But getting back to the alcohol issue before we go on and talk a little more about metabolic health. So, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've had a few patients for weight loss, metabolic health management that I've put on semaglutide, and they come back to me and say, doc, I'm not drinking as much as I used to. Have you experienced that, Brian?
Well, it makes me laugh a little bit because Tro and I mean, I especially took a ton of heat because Tro and I were having this discussion 4 years ago. And I was saying people are coming back, they're doing low carb, and all of a sudden they're saying, hey, I'm not drinking anymore. I just don't, it doesn't sound good to me. I don't really crave cookies anymore. And they start getting, and it's weird to them that they're not craving stuff that they used to crave all the time. So we started looking at that saying, okay, and Rob Sivis, the bariatric surgeon, we had a lot of discussion on food addiction and alcohol and even pornography. I mean, the big thing was pornography addiction. Some people would say, yeah, I stopped looking at pornography. I'm having more sex with my wife now, and I'm not as stressed. So, part of the way I look at it is like, okay, if and Chris Palmer's doing a lot of good work with
Yeah,
brain
he's doing
health
great work. Yeah.
and anxiety. You go, okay, look, if you're a stress eater and I get your stress better, what does that do to your stress eating? It should decrease it. And if you're an alcohol, if you're drinking because you're stressed out, and I see people, we get them on, get them, have them exercise and change their lifestyle, get enough sleep, and all of a sudden they quit drinking, and all these other things. And plus, the alcohol Huberman Lab has a really great podcast on the effects of alcohol, and you look, oh, it screws up sleep, causes an increase in cortisol, stress hormones, and if I'm increasing your stress hormones, you're more likely to binge. And the other thing you look at is what the alcohol, the effect is that you have a couple of drinks, forget it, I'm gonna live it up tonight, I'll get back on track tomorrow, and then I'll wait till January 1st, then I'll wait till after the Super Bowl now, and then I'll start
Yeah.
trying to get back into shape again. So yeah, there's absolutely a connection there, and it's really remarkable.
So what I have found is actually there's a twofold benefit. So initially, when people, especially if people go to ketosis, that they have that benefit. Yeah, I mean, and the work that Chris Palmer's doing, and I mean, obviously, it was the only way to prevent seizures in pediatric patients for what, 75 years or so, something like that, before, not quite that long, 50 years
Hmm.
before we had anticonvulsants. So definitely effect there. And now he's looking at how, this is a rational approach to a number of mental health problems. But I think that there's no question that lowering your carb intake can help with alcohol use. But then I was also speaking to the use of semaglutide specifically to further address that. People say to me, it's like, I'm not nearly as hungry as I was anymore. And I don't know if that's why I'm drinking less, because but it's like I had a lady yesterday, that says she, poured herself a drink. She doesn't drink a lot. She drinks occasionally, a few times a week. But she said after she started on the semaglutide, she just like couldn't stomach it. It's like she stayed away from it, and she's gonna stay away from it. Have you seen that specifically?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've absolutely seen that. And I've seen it. And, and I don't know why, whether it's just that the alcohol sits in the stomach longer and it's causing a little irritation there and it makes you not enjoy it as much, or whether it takes some of the enjoyment out. I don't know, but I've absolutely seen the same thing. Yeah. And it's an interesting connection. I don't know that, smoking addiction or whatever other addictions that we see, if they improve with this, it's definitely worth looking at.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's no question that, there needs to be an avenue there. Unfortunately, the traditional approach, and I, first of all, I'm all for abstinence. If a patient wants to be abstinent, and we can get them there, then that should be the primary care, the primary goal. But medicine has evolved since 1935 when AA started. And AA is a great organization, Smart Recovery, the same way I like AA because it's faith-based. But there are some people that don't fit in well into that model. And we don't treat cancer the same way we did in 1935. And so to develop other alternatives like the Sinclair method or potentially semaglutide, I'm actually hopeful. Again, I don't want to talk about a medicine being a panacea and that you're just going to take this medicine and you're going to be fine. But I think that there is the potential for that medicine to evolve into the arena of helping people control their drinking. Like the perfect patient right now would be, the patient that is metabolically unhealthy, overweight, and drinks too much. So that's a patient that, semaglutide may be a good fit for. I would not be so bold as to suggest that that would be an appropriate medicine for somebody that doesn't meet the metabolic health diagnostic criteria. You got to still have that high BMI, et cetera. But
Yeah,
I'm thinking down the road, there may be an opportunity there as one of the, we don't see a lot of developments in the drugs for treatment of alcohol disease. Camprol is out there, hasn't, it's tough to take 3 times a day. Antabuse, I'm not a big fan of. It's, trying to just make people sick so they don't drink probably isn't a good idea. So hopefully this might be another medication down the road that might help us.
yeah, and I think that these are all really important points. And I've had patients, and like you said, some people abstinence is with the way they have to go. If you have one drink and you cannot stop, you end in the gutter every time. Then you're the person who can't do anything in moderation at least. And there's other people who can have one piece of pizza every 2 months, and they go, I had it, I'm good, I'll move on, and I'll have it again in 2 months, and they do just fine. So it's the person who has that one taste of whatever it is and they can't stop. And that's the thing, is when people say everything in moderation, you start saying, well, some people can't moderate. Then on the other side of the spectrum, there's the people who, if you tell them abstinence, you're never going to have a cookie again in your life, they're like, screw it, I'm not doing it. If you say you can never, if someone has been dependent on alcohol their whole life and you go, you're never going to have a drink after today, it's too stressful and they just can't even start. But if you say, can we start by tapering down, it's a different mindset of getting into the
Yeah.
water cold rather than just jumping in all at once.
Yeah, I mean that's, and from my perspective, that's life. Life is not black or white necessarily. There is this huge gray area in between, and sometimes there is an appropriate place between drinking a lot and not drinking at all. And also, moderation certainly can be the first step toward abstinence, as it has been with many of my patients.
Yeah, and it can also be the season for that patient, right? If they're going through a divorce and they're really stressed out, that might be a really hard
Yeah.
time to quit whatever they're addicted to.
Right, right. So actually, I wanted to ask you a few questions about kind of your metabolic health approach with patients. First of all, Brian, I'm going to say this. I don't know if you remember this, but like 2.5 years ago, this doc who didn't know anything about metabolic health picked up the phone in Ohio and called Brian Lenskis and said, "Hey, it looks like you guys are doing some really neat things on got this emergency medicine background and I'm really interested in the stuff you're doing." It felt well into the lifestyle. I mean, I had read Nina Teicholz's book, and it's like lived through the low fat thing in the 70s and 80s when we kicked off the epidemics of diabetes and obesity. But I called you, I don't know if you remember
Oh,
this, and
absolutely. I totally remember that conversation. I remember where I was sitting and everything. Yeah, because I was
you
excited
were
that we have a
so
doctor who's interested in this.
you were so accommodating and encouraging. It was it really gave me encouragement to kind of take the lead here in terms of trying to changed some people's lives in this regard. And it was basically starting a new business, and there are tough times when you do that. There are times when you're putting in a lot of resources and you're a little bit slower than you'd like to be.
Yeah, and even back
But
then, I was in the standard practice still, and I was still transitioning.
yeah,
I hadn't even come over here yet to where I'm really practicing this kind of medicine. I was more talking about it and trying to implement it at the same time too. So, yeah, it's a
yeah,
scary thing to jump ship, and that's what I had to do too. After 18 years, I left a practice to start my own, and that's a scary. I know exactly what you're talking about.
yeah. I know you do, and I think Tro did the same thing. In fact, I'm sure he did. I remember that, and then you're doing double duty because I'm still working a lot in the emergency department, and then I'm working and getting this other practice up and running, and I know you did the same thing, but nothing in life is easy, right? And if you persevere and have faith, and you have a good mission, then you can be successful both for yourself and for your patients. So, but this is what I wanted to ask you. So, I know what kind of my standard approach is for a new patient. And I know you probably talk about this a fair amount. Um, you know, Regarding the emergency department work, what I came to the conclusion after working in the emergency department was that people need to do two things, two main things to get metabolically healthy, and that is keep their blood glucose under control, and the other one is keep their weight under control. It's very simplistic, but if those can be two of the goals, obviously easier said than done in some cases, then you can avoid a vast majority of those metabolic issues. But can I ask you, and then I'll make a few comments, like when you get that patient in for the first visit the first time, what is your plan usually? Do you put a CGM on them as a diagnostic tool, which I think can be just enlightening to people. But kind of walk me through what you do. I want
Yeah,
to learn something here.
and I've changed over the last couple of years. And when I first started out, everyone had we would do a scale, we do a blood pressure cuff, and CGM wasn't as used. Right now, I could throw everything away and look at the CGM. So for me, it's really depending on why that patient's coming to me. Some people are here for metabolic disease, weight loss. Some people have hyperlipidemia, and they're scared because they went carnivore and their cholesterol went up. So it depends on the patient. And really what I'd like to do is have a baseline insulin and A1C, see where they are metabolically, and obviously look at their cholesterol, triglycerides, HDL. We can look at those and go, okay, we're surprised. I'm surprised a lot of times. I have guys who look pretty fit. And I go, oh, you're a disaster. One of my patients I just saw the same thing as his insulin level was like 58. I go, oh, his A1C is 5.2, which is a 3-month sugar average. So if I'm just looking at that one marker, I'm going to miss it for sure. This guy would have get diabetes for sure if he doesn't change what he's doing. There's no doubt about it. He cannot
A-
sustain that.
Actually, I'm going to ask you to explain that to me. The insulin level is high, but he's working. Their pancreas is working so hard. It's keeping his blood sugar under control.
Exactly.
And
It's working right now, but it can't sustain that because it cannot
right,
work at that level.
yeah,
It's just like us working so hard in medicine. You can't work
yeah.
every day all the time and never take a day off. And if his pancreas is never taking a break, it's like if you drive your car full speed the whole time, it's gonna blow up the engine sooner or later.
Can I ask you, again, I'm gonna ask you, what about the patients where you put a CGM on them and they're spiking pretty high, let's say 160, 170, 180, and the story. They come in because they want to lose a few pounds sometimes, and then you immediately find with the CGM there are much bigger issues than that. But what about those patients that are spiking high and still seem to have A1Cs that are pretty much normal?
Yeah, no, it can happen. I've seen that where people go really high, really low, really high, really low, and it's all over the place. But when you start looking at their metabolic health and you start under it, because the thing that really the critics of the continuous glucose monitor jump all over is the absolute sugar number doesn't matter, and that's true. So if you're a guy who's working out really hard, for instance, and I see your sugars go up to 220 when you're working out really hard, I don't worry about that. That's just sugar you're releasing from fat stores and you're releasing liver glycogen. So that's a different story than if you ate donuts and it goes to that same level. So really it's important to have patients, like you said, keep a food log or keep a diary. How are you feeling? How are you feeling when you drank too much that night or you didn't sleep the night before? So the sugar readings, a lot of times I'm looking at stress, like saying, and it's clear. I have a lady just today I spoke to. She was kind of plateaued out, slowly losing weight. She got her job stuff square. She trained 2 people. It was really stressful to get them trained. Now she's handing them work, and now she has a little downtime at work. She's noticing her weight come down, her sugars are coming down, her blood pressure's come down. So stress is a huge factor too, and all that. So I kind of, really when I think about it, and one of the things I tell every one of my patients that comes in is what Ben Bickman told me a couple of years ago was, hey, look, 5 things you have control over. Like number one, don't be stressed out like we did during training and all that. So running around like an idiot 14 hours, 16 hours a day. And so this kind of changed my view and was an instigator for me leaving my old practice. Number two, get enough sleep. And I was thinking, oh, we were priding ourselves on, well, I only slept 3 hours last night and I'm still going. Look at me. So that's a disaster metabolically. Eat real food, exercise regularly, and don't smoke or drink to excess. These are what you have control over. The rest of the stuff, you might have bad genetics. You may have other stuff going on, but what can we control out of those things? So if you're going through a divorce, can I get rid of your stress level? Probably not. Can we mitigate it? Let's work on it. If you're drinking every night. So really, I think the most important thing is when we bond with the patient and they go, okay, you're in my corner. You're not just giving me BS and telling me, here, eat less and exercise more and you'll lose weight. It's really worrying about the metabolic and having a lot of markers that we can follow. So when this guy's insulin level drops from 48 down to 9, I go, oh my gosh, look at that. We have something tangible. What if you'd never lost a pound? It doesn't matter. You got your insulin under control and your A1C's protected, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so you get that data to begin with, and there is such a cholesterol phobia now. And this is a common scenario where you'll get a patient and their insulin level will be high like that. Their CGM will be spiky. But they're really concerned about their cholesterol level, which is 200. And it's like, you got to go through this whole educational process, at least for me, and I'm interested in your thoughts, Brian, but it's like, the issue here for you long term isn't your cholesterol level. The issue for you long term is your level of insulin resistance. And, they have to unlearn what, our government and society and the food processing industry has been teaching them, for their entire adult life. They need to unlearn the focus on fat and learn to focus on insulin resistance. And that for me sometimes is a challenge because people have been so programmed over so many years to be worrying about how much fat they're eating and what their cholesterol is.
Yeah, and us as doctors, that's our biggest risk. We look at it and go, okay, convince me otherwise. And that's what I had to do. Ira Cummins had a huge influence on me, Dr. Unwin. So it shows, here's a large french fry, here's how much sugar's in it. Here's what's in the ADA's recommended diet for you, and your insulin's high and your sugar's high. There was a study from the country of Colombia, and they showed, I mean, it's graphic, and you look at it and you think, they looked at risk of having a heart attack. So they took people who had heart attacks and who didn't have heart attacks, and they looked at all the levels and they said, what could have predicted it? LDL, total cholesterol, no, it was a risk ratio of 1, meaning it didn't matter if it was high or low. You couldn't predict it based on that. Hypertension doubled the risk of cardiovascular disease. High insulin, almost 700% increased risk. And you go, okay, why do we not talk about that? Well, because it takes time. If you have 8 minutes, I can't explain all this to you. Was my frustration in the standard model, is that I can sit there for 2 hours and explain this to you, but now I can. Or I could do it to 50 people at the same time if we want to. We could do a Zoom meeting and go, okay, let's talk about insulin resistance. What is it? And educate 50 people. Instead of spending 50 hours of your day, you spend 1 hour of your day.
Well, and Brian, you're trying to deprogram them from everything else they're hearing out there, right? I mean, in terms of, the advertising related to low fat, this and that. I think people are starting to get it. They're starting to understand that a low carb approach can be healthier than a low fat approach. But I mean, we're really trying to change 50 years of influence for
Well,
people.
and the point is, most of my patients who come to me, they've been on a low fat diet for a long time, and they're gaining weight, and they're diabetic, and they have all kinds of other health issues, and their joints hurt, and they're stressed. And so you go, okay, how about if we change? If it's not working, why don't we try a different approach and see what happens? And then the biggest argument say, look, when the food pyramid came in and look at our society, are we getting healthier as a society based on that? We're not. So we have to change something. So after 18 years of practice, I realized, or at that time, 15 years of practice, I said, what I'm doing with people is just, all I'm doing is delaying the damage, right? So you don't
Yeah.
get your amputation for 3 years instead of 1 year or whatever, and instead of saying, hey, we can reverse this process. So once you see it, and I think the biggest thing that, and I would suggest if you're not doing this in your practice, is I do Zoom meetings every 2 weeks with my patients. And so you could have someone who's been doing this for 3 years, and someone who's just starting, and someone who has no clue, and someone who's been doing this for 20 years, and they can get together and go, oh, here's what I do, here's what works, here's what doesn't work, here's what I do when I'm stressed out here. And then when people get together, there's a power and an energy and a support there and a hope when
Right.
they go, oh my gosh, that lady was on 150. I have a lady, she was on 150 units of insulin a day. Now she's on 0 insulin. And so to
Yeah.
hear that for someone who's on insulin on 10 units a day, they go, well, if she can come off 150, I could probably come off 10.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. We're just starting to do the Zoom meetings, but the reinforcement they get from seeing other people's success really is tremendous. So let me ask you this. So, you do your diagnostic phase, you've got issues to target. You go ahead and I assume you set a daily carbohydrate goal for your patients. Is that correct?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
depends on the patient, really. I mean, really, I really like to get that insulin back because I have some people go, you don't need to restrict your carbs. Look at your insulin, look at your A1C, look at your stuff. Maybe we need to work on exercise and you put on some muscle mass maybe. And so it really varies by the person, and that's why I don't like the stamp approach. Like, okay, we do the same thing with everyone. That's the whole
Yeah.
point of coming to us is that we, if you want the standard approach, go to your HMO and go and get the standard approach and get on 20 meds. Because when you're
Right.
80 years old, you're going to be on meds that have side effects and problems. And, we see the disasters that happen, and so you really like to tailor it, but yeah, we try to restrict carbs as much as possible. But again, for some people, if they're not going to give up their soda, can we do it twice a week instead of 7 days a week? Can we
Yeah.
use that as a treat on Friday or, whatever? And so really it's individualized to each patient because some people, all or none is not going to work and other people can't moderate. So you kind of figure out where are you on the spectrum. And I think a lot of it's trial and error over time. We realized, look, once you had that one cookie, you can stop for 4 days, right? It was
Yeah.
hard. And then they realized, yeah, I'm the person who shouldn't be having that cookie at all. And then over time, as we're discussing the addiction part of it, is once that brain inflammation comes down, the insulin comes down, people don't have this chronic hunger that's driving them and they're stressed out if they can't eat lunch, and they go, okay,
Yeah.
no biggie, I'll just eat dinner when I get home. It's not an emotional thing anymore.
Right, right. So you mentioned one of the other tools in the toolbox, strength training. You might, depending upon the patient's individual needs, how much you're going to emphasize that. But in my estimation, to be able to get people off the gosh darn cardio machines and get them into a strength training situation where they can, improve the receptivity of those insulin receptors on your muscles, have those muscles soak up more insulin. It is a big thing. So that's, one of the next tools I use is strength training.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. I like Ben Bakikio's approach. He's one of my favorite guys on earth. And he, really saying, can you work out 15 minutes twice a week doing strength training? Can we add in this? Can we, go golfing on your other days or ride the bike? Or like you said, it was brilliant. One of my patients lost a bunch of weight. All he did was go for a walk when he got home after work. He was stressed. He'd go for a walk. He goes, I didn't even sweat, doc. I would just talk to the neighbors. Hey, I like your plants. Then he would come back. But he said, in that time, I would have had a bag of chips and I would have had a couple glass of wine. I would have. So just by not doing that, he lost 26 pounds just by that change alone, just going for a
Well,
walk after work.
you de-stressed him. You brought down his cortisol levels as
Yeah, he did
well.
himself. That's what he did. And so stuff like
Yeah.
that, and realizing those things, the effect of all that on us.
And then another tool in the toolbox is the intermittent fasting, of course, and I'm sure, I've heard you talk about that. But I'm interested in your approach to, there's some patients that come in and it's like, yeah, I can go from 8 p.m. until noon the next day without eating anything. I do that not infrequently. And then there are other people that are just scared of the idea of not having breakfast in the morning. So, I usually take a gradual approach where, let's get a 12-hour fast in overnight to begin with, and then we'll incrementally work on that. Is that what you do as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. And then we talk about the physiology of what's happening so they understand because myself included, all of us have thought, oh, if you don't eat breakfast, you're going to starve to death, and then you're going to go into starvation mode, and your body's going to shut down your metabolism. You can't think, and the opposite is actually true for most people. But the problem is, if your insulin is really high, it's hard to fast in the morning. So it may be saying, hey, let's start with 3 meals a day, and you cut out the carbohydrates, and then over time, what what we will do a lot of times, people will merge breakfast and lunch and have a later. And some people really love to eat a big breakfast, which is probably the best thing you could do but socially dinners are really important. So like for me, if I'm doing 1 meal a day, I'll have dinner with my wife at night. Why would I have lunch by myself here at work? I'd rather have a social meal with my wife at night, even though maybe that's not ideal, in the scheme of things. So it's really what works for that person. And plus, some people are teachers, or they're salesperson, or there's certain things where their schedule is really tough. But what we don't want to do is have people, fast all day, and then at night they're starving. They end up eating cake and ice cream, and they go nuts because they've been so hungry that they lose control. So it's kind of figuring out, is it better to have some eggs for lunch and then see how you do at dinner? Maybe you won't be as hungry, whatever works really. So it's really trying to, if you're eating 6 times a day, like what we've been told by the ADA, might be a thing to say, okay, do you need to snack all day? Can we cut that out? Can you not survive from breakfast to lunch to start with? And then, slowly over time, people, and the funny thing I love is a lot of people come and go, yeah, I know, Jason Fung, I'm not going to fast. Okay, cool. 30 weeks in, they're like, oh, I didn't eat till dinner last night. I thought I was busy and I didn't have time. And I go, did you die? No, I felt great. Okay. So then it's easy. Once they do it, it's just like anything. It's like when you're going to exercise or bungee jump the first time, it's really stressful. Once you do it once, you go, okay, I survived the first time. It's probably going to be okay. Right.
Absolutely. So did you then leave it at the patient's discretion as to whether to push? I mean, what for a longer period of time? Because I actually have not pushed my patients. Some of them have pursued it independently, but the 24, the 36-hour fast, is that something that you I'm assuming you let the patient decide if they want to go there or not.
And if it
But do
works
you encourage
socially,
that?
yeah, if it's socially, or if it's needed. As a matter of fact, just last night I was walking with two of my patients. Each of them were over. One was over. Well, he was probably around 500 pounds, and the other one was only like 480. But they both done really well with weight loss, and it was amazing because my one guy, he said he couldn't tell how much weight he lost because he couldn't weigh himself before until he got to 400 pounds. Then he knew what he was doing. And now, but the point is, we were talking about that. One of the guys actually, before he came to me, did a 40-day fast and lost a ton of weight. But guess what? He gained it all back because he didn't
Yeah,
change what he was doing. He just fasted and white knuckled it through, and he lost muscle mass, and he was worse off after that. So we were
yeah.
talking. He goes, "Do you think I should do a long fast?" I don't think you should. It doesn't make sense. Maybe you do a 24, 36-hour fast and see. And especially if you're not plateaued out, some people don't need to fast. They're losing weight consistently. They're getting metabolically healthier. They're at a goal. So there may be benefits of fasting for a point of, cancer prevention and metabolic health and all that kind of stuff. But it's really an individual thing. And a lot of people just kind of start gravitating. What I see is people gravitating, and a lot of people end up on a carnivore diet. They go, I just feel better when I'm eating meat. The vegetables give me gas. I don't feel great. So they start, it's not me directing them that way. They go, I just feel better. This is where I'm getting results and things like that. So other people are eating a ton of vegetables and they feel great. Okay, cool. That works for you. I don't care. Doesn't matter, you know?
So do you think the ketosis that results from that is it do you think there's just a mental positive reinforcement? I mean, I think you're going to answer yes to this question. And in terms of the clarity that you achieve and the reinforcement then to a fasting approach. People just feel better, I guess. So,
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. There's no question about it. I mean, if you look at it, if we started out talking about religion, every major religion of the world fasts. So people are
yeah.
fasting to, nowadays in both of our churches, it's the you're doing penance, like, okay, God, I'm fasting, I'm suffering. Now you're gonna have to do what I want you to do. Instead of saying, hey, I'm trying to seek your will and I want to know you and I want to be clear. Because when you're eating Doritos all day, you're not going to be mentally clear. You're drinking soda, you're high and low and all that. So when people even out, it's surprising. And the funny thing, we're joking about that, a couple of my patients, or actually on a podcast I was just doing, we were talking about it. We did a question and answer after one of my talks, and this lady said, thank you, you made my husband nice again. And what she meant was he evened out. He was always short, on edge. He never wanted to do anything, and now he's like saying, hey, let's go for a walk, honey, let's go do things. And it's a natural progression where when you're feeling better, you exert more energy because you're feeling better. Because you feel like garbage and your joints hurt when you move, you're not going to be incentivized to exercise. So it's all
So
of these things that you and I are
yeah.
doing that's amazing when you see how it all naturally happens. It's not a forced thing where you say, okay, you got to do this and this and this and this and this, or you
Yeah.
know, like a regimented plan. So some people don't want a regimen. Some people do. And it makes me crazy because some people just give me a meal plan, tell me what to do. It's like, well, I want you to understand why you're doing it, because it'll make it that much easier when you understand how your body is working and you see the CGM and you see how you react to stress or not sleeping or drinking too much the night before. When you see it, then people say, oh, I got it. Because the CGM is great because a lot of people think they're doing the right thing and they realize, oh my goodness, whenever I eat that keto bar, my sugars go crazy. Okay, that's not the
Yeah.
thing for you. Maybe someone else can do it and they don't react that way. But you know, it's just it's so much fun to see people when they get it and they come in, they go, look at this, look what happened on Tuesday. And they know their CGM, they know, and they catch stuff all the time and they bring it to my attention. Like, look, I went there and they told me this was unsweetened tea. They were lying because look, I drank it and my sugar went crazy. And then I waited an hour and I drank it again and my sugar went crazy. I knew that they put sugar in my tea. They knew it. They didn't, you know, it didn't taste any different than their other stuff, but they knew because of the results.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I got a little interesting clinical story for you. This is a patient I had in the emergency department just about 4 months ago. So and it has to do with you know, as you mentioned, bringing people's insulin uh requirements down. So this lady was a bipolar lady, and she lived with her daughter, and her daughter got a great opportunity in an executive position to move out of town. And so, you know, they talked about it, and you know, the daughter said she would check on her mom frequently, but her daughter moved out of town. The patient, the mother was diabetic, and she was on, I think, like a total of like 75 units of insulin a day. Well, her daughter moved out of town, and the lady's bipolar activity started increasing. And though she talked a good game over the phone to her daughter thought she was doing fine. She really wasn't. So it turned out that she stopped taking her insulin. And then you know, daughter came back in town and she finds mom disheveled in their apartment, and there is beef jerky wrappers and Diet Coke cans all over the floor. So it's the mom had been surviving on this diet of Diet Coke and beef jerky. And I'm, you know, obviously we all got to be careful of the quantity of artificial sweeteners we eat. But so, you know, mom's having a bipolar break, she's brought back into the emergency department. She's been offered insulin now for a number of weeks. You know, and I'm concerned, well, you know, this lady had you know, hemoglobin A1C of like 10.5 when she was on her insulin and supposedly compliant. Now she's been offered insulin for a number of weeks. What is this going to look like? And I got her labs, and you know, I couldn't. This was before you know, I just didn't understand as much. I got her labs, and her hemoglobin A1C is down to like 6.2. You know, the previous fasting blood glucose she had, I think, was in the 130s or so, and she hadn't eaten when she came in, and you know, her blood sugars now, I think, I can't remember, 96, something like that. And it's like she had treated her insulin resistance with her, you know, bipolar approach of, you know, Diet Coke and beef jerky, and essentially managed herself. You know, I was concerned, well, maybe she's at risk for DKA here or whatever with a very high blood sugar. But she was just fine. She had treated herself. So we got her admitted to the psych unit. She ended up doing real well. But I thought it was kind of an interesting kind of reinforcement of what we're trying to do intentionally with patients that happened unintentionally with this patient.
Yeah, exactly. And all those things. And you look at like there's people who just naturally they do the right thing and they don't even know what they're doing. One of my patients, as a quick aside, he's always struggled with weight. He's Armenian, his wife's Italian, and they, you know, so anyways, he's a builder. He moved away to he was in Texas building a huge skyscraper, and he's the guy there. And so his wife calls me one day and goes, Doc, I don't care what you're doing, you're gonna see my husband, he has cancer or something. I said, why is that? Well, he was gone for 4 months, comes back, he had lost 42 pounds or something ridiculous like that. And I'm like, what's going on? How are you feeling? I'm thinking it's thyroid cancer and all this stuff. And I go, how do you feel? Great. You feel great? Yeah. Better than I have in years. Really? Most people with cancer don't feel that way. What's going on? So it turns out when he moved there, he says, look, doc, here's the situation. He explained to me, he goes, I think might be contributing. And he doesn't know anything about low carb, keto, nothing. He goes, yeah, here's what I do. I hate eating breakfast every day, but my wife worries and makes me eat breakfast every day. Since I've been in Texas, I'm a bachelor. His wife is here and he's there. So he goes,
Yeah.
look, I get up, I hate eating breakfast. I don't eat breakfast. And I think, okay, I'm going to go eat lunch today. And then he's running up down the stairs because the elevators aren't in yet. He's meeting with all the different people. All of a sudden he looks at his watch, he's like, oh, it's 4 o'clock. I didn't eat lunch again. Okay, I'll eat dinner when I get home. Then he gets home and he goes, I'm not going to dinner by myself. He usually has 2 glasses of wine with his wife, bread, pasta. They go out to eat 5 nights a week. And he said, I was there and I was like, had a rotisserie chicken. I didn't have time. I'm not going to go eat dinner by myself. He totally was doing intermittent fasting, low carb diet, cut out the alcohol and got enough sleep. And he lost 42, 46 pounds in that, like that. Then he came back and moved in with his wife and she cured him because he started gaining all of his weight back once he started going back to his old lifestyle. And I said, you were just doing exactly what we're talking about. Now he's doing those things purposely and he's doing fantastic. So
That's
sometimes
great.
it's just you make those changes naturally what your body wants instead of just doing what everyone tells you to do.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So people, some people can treat themselves. And one of the satisfying thing I think for both of us is, I mean, I don't want to be too dramatic, but we help people do the work to change their lives. And that's one of the things that is so satisfying about this is that the people come in heading in one direction and just with a little bit of education and a little bit of guidance, they get it and head a different direction. I had a 21-year-old that was, he's a male about, 5 feet 9 inches, 270 pounds. And his mom, who was a physician assistant, knew of our practice and brought him in and allowed us to work with him. Just put a CGM on him. He already had some insulin resistance, and 4 months later, he's down to 220. Had been hitting the weight room and is now cut. And feeling better than he's felt in years. And it's like we'll see you. You get it now. You're on the right path. His course really has been changed dramatically to one of, likely diabetes and associated complications and, all the complications associated with being overweight to really what is now going to be a lifetime of fitness for him and disease avoidance.
Yeah,
Um,
and
and,
that's
and
the thing. Yeah,
yeah,
that's the reward we get. No one's ever come back to me and said, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much for putting me on that blood pressure medicine. I feel great. Thank you for putting me on 7 meds." Like people don't do that unless you cure, you give them the antibiotics and they feel better. Sometimes they'll call you back, but routinely we see people come and go, I'm laughing again. I'm enjoying life. You see it in their eyes. Like I see when they come in, their face is different, their expression, their attitude is different. And so part of it, like you said, is just following them, encouraging them, kick them in the butt a little bit when you have to, and kind of figure out how to stay on track as much and not, we all blow it. We all go off track and you go, okay, how do we get back on track? What can I do to mitigate some of the damage? Like, don't have the dessert and the beer and the cake. And if you like the chips and salsa, maybe have that, but don't have the other thing. And, when people can have power over that and start changing, it's amazing when they start realizing like, so many people tell me, I don't even miss that stuff. I don't even miss eating ding dongs. I know what they taste like. I don't care. I don't want to feel sick and bloated and swollen all the time.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's very satisfying from that standpoint.
Doc,
Um,
I'm happy for you, man. This is all good stuff. Any other words of wisdom for people?
no, no, other than, I'm gonna let people know a little bit more about my practice. I'm licensed now in Ohio, Indiana, Florida, and Arizona. Have offices in Ohio and Indiana that seen a lot of patients, by telemedicine in Florida, Arizona. We hold people accountable by putting them on a structured plan with, the CGM, some intermittent fasting, strength training, and then again, I think semaglutide has its place for certain patients that get stalled. But I want to actually thank you, Brian, for putting me on the right path here. When I was having my doubts about whether I should take this leap, you reinforced that this was a good practice path for me, and that we could do a lot of good for people. And you're a wise man, Brian, because that's been borne out. So I hope to run into you. Are you going to be at the low carb thing in Florida here a month or so?
We just talked about it. I don't know. I have a wedding. I have so much stuff going on. Maybe a tough one in January, but
Yeah.
yeah. Are you going?
Yeah, I'm going to go. It's
Well,
going to be my.
I may try to make it work out. I'm looking at that. I would love to. I have a lot of friends who are going to be there and stuff, so I'm hoping I can finagle something. But yeah, I would love to see you there. That would be awesome.
Yeah, no, and I want to get out and start networking with people because the more you talk to people, you learn something in the lectures, but you learn more just talking to people about their practice and how they're approaching patients, just kind of like we have right here. And so, there's great opportunity to really take things to the next level. Hey, I also wanted to mention to you, maybe you're going to post my social media handles, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm
We'll put
little
all that in the show notes, and then yeah.
so you and Tro, you guys do well on Twitter, man. I haven't been able to crack that Twitter nut. I don't have a lot of followers on Twitter, but I did jump on TikTok, and I got a lot of, probably teenage girls, that are just paging through my TikToks, but I'm up to about 50,000 viewers
Oh,
there.
awesome, man. Yeah, I'm not a
So
TikTok guy. I've never done it. Like I keep talking about Instagram and all that. So if people send me a message on Instagram, I'm sorry I never over there, but I got kind of stuck on Twitter and just stayed there, through the crazy times and everything. But yeah, we'll have to get into each other's neighborhoods on social media too, for sure. So I'm glad you're doing all
yeah.
that too. And how do people track you down if they want to come to your practice and obviously you're in some huge areas of addiction of low carb, keto, metabolic disease and so how do people track you down in the Midwest that so many times I get calls from people that go, well, do you know anyone in my area in the Midwest? So it's great. In what states are you in Indiana,
Ohio, Indiana, Florida, and Arizona.
Florida, and Arizona? Awesome.
Um, and the name of the practice is Metabolic MDs, just Metabolic MDS. And you can find me on TikTok at DRKOLOMD. And then really I'm on YouTube and Twitter as well, but the big ones are just, go to our practice and, maybe check me out on TikTok. And, if anybody feels that we might be able to, help them, meet their health goals with a focus again, primarily on focusing on insulin resistance and then helping people lose some weight, then we love to do that. And we have a lot of people, you have this, I have all kinds of people that come in, middle-aged women, and it's like, I just got to lose 20 pounds or I just got to lose 30 pounds. And it's like, the motivation is the aesthetic of it. They don't like the way they look anymore. But then when they begin to understand that the issues are bigger than that with the insulin resistance, then it becomes a whole different project. It's like, yeah, we're going to help you look better. We'll get you there. But we want your life to be good long term, well beyond your 50s, 60s, and into your 70s and beyond. And we can help you do that. So they really get it that their motivation starts with aesthetics, but it very quickly evolves to understanding the need for metabolic health.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's the important thing is like, look, people, you want to live long, you want to be healthy, you want to be able to play with your grandkids, you want to be able to go for a hike and not be the last person to have everyone waiting for you. All those kind of things, losing 10 or 15 pounds, you can do liposuction and do that, but you're not going to learn anything and you're not going to be healthier. So it's part of it's just saying, hey, be okay with yourself. It's not you have to be the supermodel, if you're 62 years old, probably don't worry about that. But really just want to be healthy and fit and have your brain function and not be dependent on other people. There's so much that so many people wish they could go back and change it. So you have the way to change it now. Find good docs like this and stay focused. And I would say, hey, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, don't take life so serious and just do what you can. There was a ton of wisdom in this episode of talking about, what we've learned over a lot of years in medicine and emergency medicine and, adapting what we're seeing and really how the medical system's changing. So don't complain about your doctor. Find a new doctor who is going to care about you and treat you as a human being, as a patient. So many of us have put up with it. You really don't have to. There's a lot of good people out there who are realizing, okay, I want to treat my patients as human beings and get to know them as people and have friendships with them and support them and it's really important. We've lost that in medicine. So I think a lot of us are gravitating back towards that. So Doc, do you have any last words of goodbye to everyone?
No, you're right. We're gravitating back toward that, and it's so much fun. So I just want to thank you for having this podcast and for having me on it, Brian.
Hey, thanks for joining me. Track this guy down, everyone. It's good stuff.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Hope to meet you in person soon.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information, and hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.